Good morning, everybody. Now, in the last couple of days in the mainstream media in the UK, they have been obsessed by this story called the Lockdown Files. So there's this journalist called Isabel Oakeshott who regularly appears on the Piers Morgan show on Talk TV and wrote a book for Matt Hancock called The Pandemic Diaries recently, and that was published. She ghost wrote it for him. She has turned around and published, so supposedly, 100,000 private WhatsApp messages that she was given by Matt Hancock when she was writing this book, breaking a non-disclosure agreement. Now, I have no sympathy for Matt Hancock whatsoever, but this just seems an absolutely ludicrous state of affairs to begin with. Why would someone give a journalist 100,000 highly sensitive WhatsApp messages when you know that anything you write down as a text or as an email has the potential to end up in the public domain, which is exactly what has happened here. So this journalist said it's in the public interest and she's not doing it for money. But it would be interesting to know how much money she was paid to reveal these WhatsApp messages by the Telegraph, who it appeared in yesterday. So this is what's going on. Now, the thing is, there's a lot of seemingly interesting messages that have gone through here that are now in the public domain, which, of course, cast Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson and other people in the government and the civil service behind them in a bad light as to what went on during the early days of the COVID situation and response to it and the lockdowns in 2020. But that's all. It doesn't really tell us anything that is particularly new. It just tells us about what they were thinking and jokes they were making about people who were locked in quarantine hotels, which is appalling. The worst one is that Matt Hancock apparently told other people that the police, that we need to get heavy with the police, assumingly on protesters and on people who were breaking these lockdown regulations, which were tyrannical and appalling at the time. But it doesn't really tell us anything particularly new. We know the police were being tyrannical. We know that people in government were ordering to do that. We know the lockdowns were appalling. They've destroyed businesses. They've destroyed kids' education. They've ruined people's social lives for a long, long time. They affected many, many millions of people's mental health because we couldn't see each other. No, all it kind of says is, it tells us is, well, they kind of knew that it wasn't going to make much difference and they were not really following any science. They were just kind of doing it because they were doing it. What these things don't do is they don't tell us about any of the things that were far more serious. Firstly, that this was being orchestrated on a global level by the powers that be in the World Health Organization, linked to the United Nations and obviously the World Economic Forum and so on, so that they could later on bring in the injections, the experimental mRNA injections, which are now leading to a lot of adverse health events and effects, and we know about them. This revelation is just stoking people up to get angry about something that we pretty much already know anyway, apart from the specific emails between these two people, Matt Hancock, Boris Johnson and others, that we already know to be absolutely appalling and terrible. What it doesn't do as well is it doesn't say anything about Matt Hancock in relation to the Midazolam murders. 10,000 people plus older people who were sent to care homes and given do not resuscitate orders and were then dosed up with Midazolam, which stops them breathing and they die. And this was done on Matt Hancock's watch. But the same journalist who has released these revelations of lockdown files, of all these WhatsApp messages that went on in the lockdown, she was asked about the book she wrote about Matt Hancock on Twitter, and she replied. I mean, I don't reply to anybody on social media who's having a go at me. It's not worth your time, but she did. So there was a little exchange on the 3rd of December 2022, after she'd published ghostwritten. Well, Matt Hancock published the book on the Pandemic Diaries. Isabel Oakeshott had ghostwritten it. And so someone asked Isabel Oakeshott this: what chapter covers Midazolam? And her reply, which is still up on Twitter, look today, it's still there. It says, none, because it wasn't a thing. I've seen zero evidence whatsoever. This is a very silly conspiracy theory that undermines much more legitimate concerns. So that's her opinion on Midazolam and the issues that surround Midazolam, that it's a conspiracy theory. Well, I will say it's not a conspiracy theory. Tens of thousands of people got do not resuscitate orders in care homes and were killed. And this lockdown files that are telling us some things is also a whitewash of all the horrors of the Midazolam murders and all the horrors of the injections which came after that, which the book and these lockdown files don't cover at all, because they are exclusively dealing with the first 6 months of the lockdown. They don't go into the injections. Now, she, of course, is the girlfriend of Richard Tice, who is the leader of Reform UK, a political party in the United Kingdom that has been promoting the injections and saying how much the injections are really good things. They're going to get us out of lockdown, and even go to the extraordinary statement of saying that Brexit meant we can get more people injected more quickly. So this is the kind of circle of people that we are talking about here. So I haven't commented on these yet because I've been looking and mulling it over and thinking about it and looking at it from all the different angles. And the conclusion I've come to is that, yes, it will raise some kind of outrage again, some selective outrage against some selective things, which we already mostly know about. But then it directs people away from the far more important issues which are being uncovered at the moment, the Midazolam murders, the injection genocide which is going on. Not to mention it being put into the media cycle at the same time as Rishi Sunak's appalling so-called Windsor framework, which they're touting as solving the issue with Northern Ireland in Brexit, when it doesn't do anything of the sort whatsoever. And they're spinning this story that now Northern Ireland is really, really well off because it remains in the single market, but we fixed the issue with the Brexit deal, which wasn't a good deal, with Northern Ireland being stuck in the European Court of Justice and having to obey EU laws. And that's just killed the story, and no one is focusing on that Brexit sellout as well. Rather ironic when Isabel Oakeshott and Richard Tice were around in the Brexit movement back in the day. It doesn't also, it turns people's attention away from the other horrific things which were being planned and are still being planned by the World Economic Forum and the globalists, who wanted to bring in vaccine passports on the back of injections, on the back of lockdown. Doesn't even go anywhere near touching that issue. And of course, what's happening right now is that a consultation has just finished where the government is trying to bring in digital identity for accessing government services. And there's another consultation about bringing in central bank digital currency, which is all a progression of the same program that is being rolled out. So you've got lockdowns, injections, vaccine passports, digital identity, central bank digital currency, all orchestrated by the globalists in the center who have got their puppets in all the regimes around the world. And Klaus Schwab even celebrates this. He's even bragging and boasting about this when he says, we have infiltrated the cabinets of all the governments around the world. So these people who are in the Johnson regime, now in the Sunak regime, the Trudeau regime in Canada, the Biden regime in America, the Ardern regime in New Zealand, the various regimes in Western Europe, who have all been captured and infiltrated by the World Economic Forum, are pushing this program. What these lockdown files tend to do is to get you to sort of believe that it was all a bit of a mistake. Everyone made some mistakes. It was a mistake to do the lockdown. It was a mistake to say that people should wear masks. It was a mistake to close the schools and say kids shouldn't go to school. Nevertheless, that's probably a good thing, given what some schools are teaching these days, but that's another issue entirely. If schools were doing their job, then yes, it would be bad for kids not to be able to go to school and learn about maths and literature and history and language and music and sport, etc., etc. But yeah, there we go. But it wasn't just a mistake. It was a global program to destroy the fabric of our society and our economy, and it's still going on. And this is not admitted at all. And when you bring up the wider and bigger issues which are more important, the same answer comes back from these mainstream swamp creatures. It's all a conspiracy theory. Well, it's not. It's happening. And this is why I've come to the conclusion here that the lockdown files as they are, even though it does give some revelation, about a couple of characters who did some things in the early days of the lockdown, it distracts us from the real issue of fighting what's coming in now with this central bank digital currency and global surveillance system that they want to do. So you've got to keep your eye on the ball and know your enemy and know how deceptive and what twists and turns they will use to keep you from actually realizing what really is going on and distract you with something that's pretty much already been worked out by most people. So that's what I think is going on here. So what do? We just keep on fighting in every sphere that we can. We go out and protest against Agenda 2030 and the little lockdown areas they want to bring in and get people into in their so-called 15-minute city programs. And we take action in the political realm as well, because these people weren't just messing up and making mistakes. They were acting against the people of our country, and we need to sweep them away politically. That's why I've made the Heritage Party. We were against lockdowns from the very beginning when a lot of these people weren't saying a word. Where were they when I and thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people were out marching through the streets in London to protest it, and the police were coming at us with their batons drawn? We now know that Matt Hancock had ordered that or had told people to get heavy with the police. But where were these people? They were nowhere to be seen. The people who are really making a difference are the people who had the courage to stand up from the very beginning and say, no, we're going to go out on the street and we're going to resist. And we're also going to stand politically. We're going to make new media organizations. We're going to bring legal cases where it's viable to overturn what this tyranny is doing. And we'll continue to do that this year in local elections, next year in the general election, and in every other area that's possible. So although this is titillating and tantalizing, keep your eye on the ball and fight what needs to be fought at the moment. Interesting thing now is the globalists, what they're doing now is escalating and stoking up war in Ukraine. And these people, who are the Telegraph and the so on, all the journalists associated with these things, most of them are stoking up escalation of war in Ukraine. I've been saying from the very beginning, this is the latest thing the globalists are doing. We need to stand against this and not escalate. We need to de-escalate the war in Ukraine. So the test you can apply at this moment to see whether someone really understands what's going on is, do they support escalating war, which could potentially lead to a nuclear conflagration, and of course is leading to the same globalists who made billions of pounds from the injections making billions of pounds from sending armaments to the Zelensky regime. Same people are behind it, it's just a different focus, a different sphere of influence, a different sphere of impact, but it's the same thing. It's leading to poverty and the destruction of our societies. That's what it's about. The test is to see what's their opinion on this. Then you can really see who understands what's going on. So think about that, and don't be distracted by things that are titillating and are really, nothing to write home about.